All right, welcome to This Week in Niche Pursuits News. My name is Jared Bauman. Last week, we left you on a bit of a cliffhanger with the impending news of a TikTok shutdown. Well, a lot's happened in the last 7 days. As Thomas and I were spending the first part of today going through it to make sure we had it in the proper order, from shutdowns to restarts, the whole 9 yards. We'll cover the timeline along with really what's next for TikTok. That's our big story today. But there's a lot of other things that are happening in the news. Google has been causing chaos for SEOs by blocking third-party tools. So we'll dive into those details. We've got some brand new AI news, brand new to the tune of $500 billion. So that's kind of big. We'll address that. I teased it. I'm joined again today by Thomas Smith. So, of course, we'll be talking all about side hustles and our weird niche sites as well. Welcome, Thomas.
It's great to be here.
You picked a good week. It's a good week. We kind of had to start cutting stories as more kind of crept up throughout the week. And even today we were adding stuff. So let's try to get through it as quickly as we can. Let's dive into the big story, TikTok. So last week, obviously, we were going into the impending shutdown that was going to happen on Sunday, Saturday to Sunday. And no one really knew what was going to happen, although it was looking increasingly likely that we were going to have this shutdown. So what ended up happening? Let's just quickly go through kind of a high-level timeline of events, and then we'll get into some of the details and what it means. I have it up on screen, an article by the BBC. I'm also going to look at an article by Forbes. There's a great article by Forbes with a timeline. So midnight Eastern time on January 19th, the nationwide ban took effect. And basically TikTok has started shutting itself down and pulling everything in the hour before that. Let's see, at 10 a.m., the next Sunday morning, basically, Trump, at that time, the incoming president of the United States, announced that he will sign an executive order on Monday, the 20th, that would delay that ban. There was some feedback about this that allowed basically TikTok to start restoring their app. By 1 p.m. Eastern on January 19th, some TikTok users have reported the app was back online. And then we started basically going into the following day, which is where, let's see, I'm trying to find the right time, but basically on January 20th at 8:20 p.m. Eastern, Donald Trump signed an executive order halting the TikTok ban for 75 days and basically was saying, with the intent to determine the appropriate course of action with respect to TikTok, and about, we were dealing with this whole 50% ownership controlled by U.S. interests. There's a lot of other details there. That's the high level of what happened. We'll get into what happens next. Thomas, you were kind of watching this in real time. Almost, we have actually a personal story of yours to share here in a second. What did I miss out on? What did I leave out? What are some details you think are important in this?
I think one thing that startled people is everybody was kind of expecting this ban to go into effect on Sunday, and then Saturday night, if you're on the West Coast, all of a sudden you got this message saying, "Hey, TikTok is down." All these news outlets started to report it all at once, and I was kind of expecting, like we were hinting at the last podcast, wake up Sunday morning, check the phone, see if it's still going. Yeah. And I got this message Saturday night. I was scrambling. Oh my gosh, what happened? And pulled it up, and sure enough, pulling up the TikTok app on my phone, you had that little message that said it wasn't available. It took down some other stuff too, which to me was even a bigger deal. CapCut, I believe, went down, which is their video editor that I use for stuff, even though I'm not really that active on TikTok. And then, of course, there was the reversal of that on Sunday that you mentioned. So I think there was a lot of swings around, and a lot of people didn't realize the timeline it was going to happen so much earlier than they were expecting. What I did, though, which is what you're seeing on the screen here, if you're watching on the video, is the second I saw that alert come up, my sort of day job is, as I run a content agency, we do a lot of news photography. So I pulled out my camera, I snapped a picture of my hand holding the phone with that little message on there, and submitted it to all of our different content agencies, and woke up the next morning and found it basically on the cover of Wired magazine in a Newsweek. So I feel like I got my mileage out of this thing. But I think for people who are big creators on the platform, it was very destabilizing. And also the kind of unexpected swings back and forth were probably even worse than the couple of hours that the app turned out to be down.
It's interesting you mentioned that because the reality here is that it went down on Saturday night, and certainly if you're on the West Coast like us or in other parts of the world, it would have happened Saturday. We'll call it late evening, but certainly while most people are still awake. But if you're on the East Coast, it happened, kind of 11 midnight, around that time. If you're in Europe, it was happening in the morning. If you're in Asia, it was happening in real time throughout different time periods, but it was only really down. I mean, how long was it down for? Like 10, 11 hours in total in the end?
Yeah, not long, but I think it's still all that uncertainty that we had raised at the last time we recorded last week. None of that has really gone away. It's just kind of been pushed a little bit further down the line. Like they kicked the can a little bit further. But all the questions about what ultimately happens with the platform, I think, are still out there and maybe even intensified because it felt like this game of chicken, right? Where the courts were saying, we're going to shut you down. And ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, was saying, we're not going to sell, we'll close the app if we have to. No one really knew who was going to kind of give way first. Yeah. And ultimately, neither of them did. The courts let the ban stand. That was something we were speculating about last week. And TikTok, lo and behold, shut down. And really, it was just this executive order that kind of kicks things, I think it's 75 days into the future, that gave us a little bit more of a timeline. But the same problems are still there. And the same uncertainty, I think, about the future of the app is still there. So I think what we have to look at is, will there ultimately be a sale or a merger of TikTok into some other probably US-based company? And one other detail was that people saw that the CEO of ByteDance was at the inauguration of the new president on Monday. So that suggests that there's some, support there, and maybe there's going to be some kind of a merger that'll keep the app going. But I think nobody expected necessarily that either side was going to keep going, and nobody blinked. And that was really the biggest surprise to me.
So the executive order was to give 75 additional days for ByteDance to sell a stake in the platform or reach a deal with new President Donald Trump. And so there's kind of two options there. You kind of mentioned like what's going to happen. I think the push is for them to sell a 50% stake to a US-based group. Here we have an article that got published on Saturday night and then was updated earlier this week on Tuesday. And we're going to probably start seeing a lot of this. I've seen a lot of different rumors about who might be in line to look at purchasing part of it. This is Perplexity AI makes a bid to merge with TikTok US. Apparently, they submitted a bid on Saturday to TikTok parent ByteDance, proposing the merger. The new structure would allow for, the existing investors to retain their equity stakes, but would bring more video to Perplexity. And so there's just kind of all these different theories about different people. You talked about the inauguration and who was there. But basically, we have like 2.5 months to figure something out. Again, we talked about this last week. It sure feels like we've got to have a TikTok in the United States. It would be crazy to me. I'm surprised it actually went down for 12 hours, but it would be crazy in the big scheme of things for, I think, TikTok to go away permanently in the United States. And, several articles are quoting the same numbers we reported last week, 170 million users. Feels like something's got to give, and we've now got 2.5 months. So if I'm doing my math right, we're end of January, February, March. We're looking at kind of early to mid-April. Something's got to give by then.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things stand out to me about the future here. One is that if TikTok actually merged with Perplexity, that would be, that's a huge threat to Google. That's a huge threat to the players that are in the traditional search space. Because when you think about Google, you've got the search engine, obviously, and that's the core product, but YouTube is a huge piece of Google overall in terms of video content. That's really where they're sending a lot of traffic, putting a lot of emphasis at this point. A lot of people see video as the future, myself included. And think about if you took the AI power of Perplexity on the one hand,
which is very good. They do a good job.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing a great job on AI search, and that seems to be the future of search. And then you've got the future of video, which is vertical video is even hotter than most of YouTube, or a lot of YouTube is still the sort of traditional long form horizontal. So you take the basically most exciting vertical video platform and the most exciting AI search, merge them together. We might not need the Justice Department to take down Google's monopoly. This is something that really stages some real competition if that comes along.
I mean, I'm not an expert in mergers and acquisitions. The MA world is not our cup of tea here, but it does feel surprising that this has been around since April. This upcoming ban and need for TikTok to diversify its ownership group, and obviously we know that it's gone to the courts, and that was something that needed to happen, and it's being resisted by ByteDance and those kind of things. But nonetheless, to some degree, why haven't we seen more suitors line up? Why haven't we seen more big tech companies line up to kind of get access to 170 million people? Yes, there's a lot of crossover to Meta and to all these other companies, but nonetheless, like, TikTok's the hottest thing around right now. Vertical video is clearly seeming to be the future. Like, I'm surprised Perplexity AI is kind of the first bigger player we're hearing about, and they're not big players up against a Google or a Meta or these other large, kind of FANG companies, as they call it.
Yeah, I think what happens with these kinds of court cases is nothing for a long time and then everything all at once, right? So like years can pass where there's talk and there's legislation and there's hearings and everything, and everybody goes, we don't know, we're just going to watch it. And then all of a sudden it can change everything. And so what I'm looking at beyond this is, okay, TikTok, yeah, that's a big deal. I want to know what's going to happen with that. But what does this mean for some other long court cases that could all of a sudden have a result? Like, obviously the Google antitrust, but also there's all these pending cases against OpenAI and their other kind of AI companies over copyright and other challenges around that. And everybody, I feel like, is just kind of waiting to see how that plays out. And going, well, that's so far in the future, we're not going to worry about it. But what if something similar to this were to happen there? I mean, the courts pretty clearly showed here that they didn't care about politics. They didn't care about users and the vertical videos that they want to see. They were just going to follow whatever directive they were going to put down. They didn't really worry about the timeline or anything. They could easily do that for any other big player in the space, and we could see probably even greater disruption overnight. I mean, what would happen if they suddenly decided there was something wrong with the way OpenAI has trained its models and said, nope, no ChatGPT, order shut that one down? It could happen, and it could happen just as quickly as this. So that really, I think, to me, shows there's risk here, and these kinds of changes, even though they feel slow and it feels like, nothing's ever going to happen, we've seen here firsthand, it really can make some big changes.
It does set an interesting precedent for what's coming forward. We know that AI is in all the governments, in all the with lawsuits and government interaction and stuff like that. So it does kind of set a precedent for the fact that if they're willing to do this over something like TikTok, which I don't really have a problem with TikTok itself, just its ownership structure and some of the data, the data that it has and has access to in terms of national security. If it can adjudicate in that sort of environment, what would it do in an area where we're dealing with other types of things that AI can have an interest in and role in? So, we'll keep following along here. I mean, I don't think you need to hold your breath anymore. I think the crazy week is now going to settle into. We'll get updates as we get them, but it's not like it's years in the future, like we kind of feel with Google's antitrust lawsuit, right? When we got that result, we're like, okay. It's going to be a long time before we actually see the results of this. So I think that while you don't have to hold your breath anymore, certainly we've still got a couple months of volatility ahead of us to see where TikTok's going to land. And I'll just close out because we have so many stories we got to get to, but I'll close out with kind of something you said last week and something we got to hammer down. Like, we all are so familiar with it, just platform risk. And just, I think this does not help reduce that platform risk or the trepidation that comes with that for TikTok users, and certainly people who use TikTok to market their business or use the marketplace to sell their products and so forth. It's going to be a kind of anxious, nervous couple of months as we wait for the final results there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Diversify. Get on multiple platforms. Definitely.
Got a couple months here to till the next thing comes. Okay, let's get into our second story. This is one I teased at the outset as well. And this is that Google appears to be blocking SEO tools, SEO rank checking tools. And really, I've got a couple stories I'll go through. From a high level, this isn't something that's been reported per se. This isn't something that's been confirmed by Google, but basically, let me scroll down here. There's a great screenshot. Here it is. Like, basically, all of a sudden, starting in mid-January, about January 9th or 10th, the SEMrush and SimilarWeb, they all have these tools that show overall SERP volatility. And, in the weeks leading up to it, for example, we'll use SEMrush, activity, volatility had been in the very high range. It's kind of scored 1 to 10, and it had been in an 8, 9, or 10 level for the preceding several weeks. It then on January 9th or 10th dropped down into a very normal 4 or 5 period and kind of hung out in that 4 or 5 or 6 range. Now, normally that wouldn't be all that weird. We have a lot of volatility sometimes, and then we don't have volatility sometimes. It's kind of calm, not a lot of changes in the SERPs. But all of them were reporting the same thing, and it wasn't lining up with what everyone else was seeing. Everyone else was still reporting lots of volatility, but all the tools were saying that the volatility had gone away. And so that's kind of what led this entire I guess we'll just call it a looking into of what's been going on. And it does seem that basically Google has found some additional new ways to kind of restrict what these tools are able to find and to report on. I'm going to share this story here. This story is a couple days newer, and it's in Search Engine Journal. It's titled "Google Causes Global SEO Tool Outages," and it says Google is blocking. Let me get rid of this pop-up. Google is blocking search result scraping, causing global outages at rank and keyword tracking services. I'll just read a line or two and then see if you've seen any of this, Thomas, in real life. Google cracked down on web scrapers that harvest search results data, triggering global outages at many popular ranking tools like SEMrush that depend on providing fresh data from search results pages. What happens if Google SERPs are completely blocked? A certain amount of data provided by tracking services have long been extrapolated by algorithms from a variety of data sources. It's possible that one way around the current block is to extrapolate the data from other sources. There's a lot of details here, but I'll keep it high level and stop there, or at least pause there. Are you seeing this in real life, Thomas, in either what you're doing or just what you're reading online?
I think we've seen this a lot over the longer time frame. I know this is when they've started to detect it, but there's been a lot of times where everybody anecdotally has seen their rankings go all over the place, and then you check these volatility tools, and it's like, yep, smooth sailing, all good. And I think we had all, and as an industry, wondered, okay, are we just being targeted? Is it just us? And we're so tiny in the grand scheme of things that we're not showing up on the volatility, and that's why it's showing smooth seas when we're all seeing huge changes. And I think this shows that maybe there's been more volatility than the tools are picking up, because Google is actually actively blocking the tools from picking up on that volatility. But to me, I think this is ultimately, it's AI Overview's fault. I think that's what it comes down to. And the reason for that is these tools have always existed in kind of a gray area, because technically it's against Google's terms of service to scrape their results. Right. But they always tolerated it because it probably wasn't that labor intensive for them to serve these extra queries. They probably didn't feel like playing that cat and mouse game, because there's a bunch of technical ways to get around those kinds of restrictions. So they probably just kind of let it go and figured this is a drop in the bucket in the overall scheme of things. But now that they're doing AI overviews, and serving each query might cost them a couple cents versus fractions of a penny in the old system, suddenly, if you've got a bunch of these rank tracking tools literally putting in every query under the sun to see where things are, and they have to make an AI overview for each one of those, I think they're waking up and going, okay, this is costing us a lot. We better put a stop to it. And so that's what I think you're seeing is Google doesn't want to spend all the resources on serving AI overviews, which are costly, to these tools that don't click on ads, don't generate them any revenue. So we're seeing a crackdown that we haven't seen when it was cheap and easy to serve the queries.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it does talk about AI overviews in these articles quite a bit, and I think you're really getting into the heart of a lot of it. Here's in that article, that second article, here's a line that was shared. They were quoting a LinkedIn post when they were referencing this, but they said this LinkedIn post noted that multiple tools weren't refreshing their content, but it also noted that blocking hasn't affected all data providers. Systrix, Monitor Rank were still working. Someone from a company called HaloScan reported that they made adjustments to resume scraping data from Google and have recovered. Someone else reported that another tool called My Ranking Metrics is still reporting data. So whatever Google is doing is not currently affecting all scrapers. It may be that Google is targeting certain scraping behavior. So that's exactly out of the article, exactly to what you just said. It does seem to center around AI overviews, probably from a cost standpoint. It's always been in their terms of service, but it's also making it very difficult, though, for SEOs to do their job. It's already hard enough to do their job, with Google Search Console data getting delayed and not getting reported at the same rate it used to. It's also getting harder to do our job with AI overviews in general. And then now you've got this kind of stuff. So it's it's a bit of a mystery, but it's slowly being uncovered to kind of learn exactly what is at the root of it.
Yeah, I think ultimately the thing that's going to fix this for these companies is probably, ironically, going to be AI. Because, we just saw this morning as we we're recording this that OpenAI released their operators system. They're rolling that out. It's basically an agent. So it's essentially an AI that can go and do stuff for you on the internet, just like a user would. And that is the kind of thing that you could leverage as even an individual website owner to go and say, okay, go to the Google SERPs and scrape all my keywords and find out, where I rank. And it would pretend to be a person and go and do it. And can Google detect that? It's probably going to use your own browser. You set it up and you let it kind of run for a couple hours and come back. And it's like you have your own private Hrefs data essentially at that point. So I think if they're going this route, they probably took some simple steps to block the most obvious stuff. But the companies that really need that data are going to find ways around it. And they're probably going to leverage their own AI. And we might end up in an arms race, or it might be that Google will go back to saying, not worth it. And we'll see these changes, basically just kind of go away. But it's one more reason, I think, to look beyond rank trackers, right? We've already seen that they don't pick up a lot of kind of new keywords. It's harder to know where things stand with AI overviews. To me, I've kind of moved away from them a lot and just gone towards more understanding my own data and what my users want. I think that's worked pretty well. And it makes me think this is sort of like one more reason to not rely on those quite so much as I would have probably 3 years ago.
Well, I'll have an example of that exact scenario in my side hustle section today. So that's interesting to hear you say. I'm sure we'll be talking more about that in the coming weeks as we kind of learn more information about that. But for now, let's move on. Thomas, this is really a story that's right up your alley. I'm going to turn it over to you here as I pull it up on screen. It is about this new $500 billion company that has created around this idea of AI. Share the story with us.
Yeah, so basically there was a big announcement this week of a new company called Stargate. And this is an AI infrastructure project, basically. And we saw it announced with Donald Trump, the new US president, along with Sam Altman from OpenAI. We've got Oracle up there, and it's apparently partially bankrolled by SoftBank, which is a big investor in the tech sector. And basically the idea here is to create the infrastructure that companies need to train and then run these giant AI models. And we've seen this happen probably over the last couple of years where new models have gotten more and more intensive to run. So when the first GPT-3, I think it was, when ChatGPT first rolled out, was the kind of state of the art of LLMs, it didn't use a lot of resources. It was certainly more labor intensive to train and to use than some other systems that were out there, like the traditional Google search. But now with models like O1 from OpenAI, the reasoning model, where you put in a query and it might spend a minute or two running other queries essentially in the background before it responds, they use an insane amount of computing power and an incredible amount of electricity. And so this initiative is basically some of these big companies coming together, kind of doing this alongside the government. Imagine what like a railroad would have done 100 years ago. It'd be like, we're building infrastructure. This is sort of the 21st century equivalent. And the idea is they're going to come together and build the data centers and the electrical grid tie-ins and stuff to have a firm foundation to basically scale up these gigantic models. But there's already drama. As soon as this got announced, Elon Musk started basically trolling Sam Altman, saying, you don't have the money in place. This is never going to come together. This is a big scam. And they went back and forth. So there's a lot of kind of fun drama. I don't know where it ultimately land on this specific thing, but it's a reminder that, as we kind of alluded to with AI overviews and the cost there, these new AI tools are so powerful, but they require so much power to operate. And that's just going to make it harder and harder and more expensive over the long run.
You don't think about this kind of stuff when you go to ChatGPT and type in your query, or when you feed it 200 pages of information and ask it to give you different data points and different answers you can pull out of it. Like, there's so much computing power that goes into this, not only to build these LLMs, but then to actually kind of service the uses of them. And at some point, someone's got to put together a plan that helps put this together in terms of the infrastructure that's needed. To your point, it's like, how does that affect us on a daily basis? It doesn't. It's just a lot of big businesses getting together and creating even bigger businesses. But it does at least highlight how important the kind of the underbelly of the AI future is, and the fact that it takes an immense amount of resources. And I think that's what that article really highlighted to me is it's something that has to be paid attention to. And you can't just snap your finger one day when you need it and it's there. You have to plan and prepare for it. And we're already starting to reach the edges of what's possible with the current data centers and infrastructure that's in place.
Yeah, I think it's big and nebulous and kind of political, but the big takeaway for our industry, I think, is that we're getting an incredible bargain on AI that we're using today. Like, I think of it, I used DoorDash very early in its evolution, before the pandemic, before everybody was using it. And you could buy a burrito or something for $2 and have it delivered across the city. And it made no sense economically. And it turned out that there was a ton of investment kind of trying to build the app and get it off the ground. And so you weren't paying anything close to what it actually cost. And then, of course, that shifted. And now it'll cost you $14 to have your burrito delivered.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah, exactly. And I think we're seeing a similar thing with AI right now, is that we're getting a huge bargain. We're not getting charged anything close to what it actually costs to deliver the AI services that we all can use. So if you're implementing AI right now, like, this is the time to do it. Get as much as you can when it's cheap. Get the equivalent of a lot of those $2 burritos while you can, because ultimately the stuff is so expensive, the price is going to go up a lot. And early adopters, like a lot of people in our industry who have laid the foundations, gotten good at using it efficiently, we're going to be in a great shape to, weather that.
Let's just briefly touch on this last story, and pretty much only because it was something that ties closely to what we talked about in the weeks prior. And this is a story in Search Engine Journal. Google rejects EU's call for fact-checking in search and YouTube. Google rejects EU's fact-checking requirements as it relates to search and YouTube, define the new disinformation rules. Yeah, basically, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this story, but it is relevant, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, it was 2 weeks ago, I believe, that Meta was getting rid of their fact checkers. And they were kind of moving on from this process they'd had in place for a long time to verify, to validate that information was accurate and true, to fight against misinformation. And we talked a couple weeks ago about it. I believe it was Spencer and I that were doing the podcast that week. And we talked about, will there be a domino effect here? Does one company decide to cut this and then others follow? Seems, although we don't know if they're actually connected to each other. That was Meta, this is Google, but it does feel like another domino falling here. Basically, there's this disinformation code as part of the Digital Services Act, the DSA. Basically, Google has argued that their current moderation tools like SynthID watermarking and AI disclosures on YouTube are already effective. He pointed to last year's elections as proof that Google can manage misinformation without fact-checking. And they confirmed their plans to fully exit all fact-checking commitments in the EU's voluntary disinformation code before it becomes mandatory under the DSA. Now, this is interesting. I did want to get a second opinion on it from you, Thomas. You and I were at a conference together on AI, conference on how the EU was handling this sort of copyrighted information versus how the US was handling it. And so I know you probably have some thoughts kind of being deeply embedded in this type of copyrighted information as it relates to this action by Google, as it relates to what we talked about a couple weeks ago with Meta.
Yeah, I think Europe is usually the most, I'd say, proactive or like restrictive in terms of implementing these big regulations. And it ends up impacting what happens everywhere in the world when this happens, when Europe puts some new thing in place. And that's where we see GDPR, for example, is a great one. We see all those little things that come up and say, do you want cookies? Can we put cookies on? And you have to click that button on every website that you go to. And so a lot of these things that happen elsewhere in the world impact basically everyone. So I think that's maybe what we're seeing here is Google's basically saying, well, we're not going to follow that. We're basically going to opt out of it. And I think for our industry, most of us are trying our best to make good content. And maybe some big companies, not going to name names, decide that it's not good, even when it is, or we're doing our best. But fundamentally, most of us are trying to do a good job. And so I think disinformation and misinformation was probably not directly a concern, But I know I've created great content on YouTube, uploaded it, and got flagged by some kind of content filter for something that wasn't at all present in there. And just gotten caught in this net that's cast really large. And so even if you're doing a great job and you're doing your best, there's always that fear, and it kind of holds you back where you know, even like, I'm thinking I could give an example of what happened with my video and what I figured out it was, but is that going to get this podcast like flagged in some way if I even say certain things? So I think that's where there's this fear and self-censorship that maybe we do in our industry when we know we're not, you know, going to run afoul of misinformation, but we're worried about getting caught in the net. So anything that kind of tones that down, that fact checking down, that might mean fewer false positives, and we can feel a little bit more emboldened to just create the content and, you know, say the things we want to.
We'll follow this as it progresses. Obviously, it does have a lot of dovetails to what we do in our industry, and at the same time feels, you know, kind of higher level, kind of above us, kind of political, kind of. So, you know, does it affect us in some ways? Yes. But it's information, it's news. So we want to make sure you knew about it. Probably having to do with this kind of, you know, the fallout from what happened with Meta a couple weeks ago and other companies kind of revisiting their policies as well. So, I was that 5 stories? Was that 6 stories? My goodness, that was a lot. Did a pretty good job. I'd say we're like a minute over. So I'll take the win there. Let's move on to side hustles.
Hey everyone, Spencer here, founder of Niche Pursuits. So you probably know the importance of building internal links so your site can perform well in Google. Today I want to share how Link Whisper can help you add outbound internal links to your articles. As you draft your article in WordPress, Link Whisper scans your site, identifying the best internal link opportunities. It then recommends the perfect anchor text and link to add. With just a click, your content is updated with new internal links. No more expensive tools or tedious manual site searches. Link Whisper does the heavy lifting right inside the WordPress editor. Say goodbye to the hassle of internal linking. With Link Whisper, you can focus on what you do best, creating great content. Use the coupon code podcast today and get $15 off. Elevate your website's internal linking with Link Whisper now. Building smart internal links just got easier. Go to linkwhisper.com today and be sure to use coupon code podcast to get $15 off.
I thought I'd focus this week on an update on my calculator sites. Now, I said at the beginning of 2025, I'm like, man, we've been featuring these calculator websites for the past couple of years here on the Niche Pursuits podcast, mainly on the weird niche section. And we're always blown away by how these typically old, antiquated, simple, packed with ads calculator sites are getting so much traffic and ranking with so little work being done to them. So I wanted to try it. And so I kind of said, I'm going to do 5 this year. Well, a couple updates. First, let's talk about calculator site number 1. It's been live now at the time of recording for 14 days. Okay. And so I'm kind of blown away by how well it's doing with perspective, for the record. So Google Search Console shows that it's gotten 15 organic clicks in the last 7 days.
Nice.
Ahrefs already has it ranking for 5 keywords.
Wow.
And it's getting an estimated traffic of about 3 in Ahrefs. So, yeah, again, 5 keywords, great. Not much traffic, fair enough. That'll be the caveat I list here in a little bit. It's ranking between number 6, 7, and 8 for its target keyword. Now, it's an exact match domain, so it's pretty easy to look at the domain and figure out what its target keyword is. But it's ranking number 6, number 7, or number 8. It's been live for 14 days. Calculator site number 2 was launched 9 days ago. So I've got 2 live now. Google Search Console, GSC, shows 23 impressions, but no clicks in the last 7 days. So it's clearly indexed. It's clearly getting impressions, but it has not gotten any traffic yet, at least not from organic from Google. Now, Ahrefs, on the other hand, remember the first site, the site that is getting traffic, was ranking for 5 keywords, estimated traffic of 3 people per month. Ahrefs for this second site already has it ranking for 9 keywords and getting an estimated traffic of 20 organic visits per month. And it's already sitting at number 9 for its target keyword. Now, I would say that the second site is targeting a more difficult keyword than the first site. They're both targeting keywords that I'm like, it's around a calculator topic. They're different topics. And both of them are like, I think they're beatable, right? Like I tried to pick some topics that looked like the sites that were ranking either were not from strong domains or they were old sites that didn't really serve the user very well. But basically, I'm ranking, call it number 6 and number 9 for my target search terms. Now that calculator site number 2, that target keyword, it gets an estimated 600 searches per month. So it's not a terrible keyword, and we know you'll rank for more than just that one keyword. So I guess in summary, I've gotten 2 of the 5 live, and I feel very happy with how quickly they're ranking, not only getting indexed. Indexation alone these days is hard enough. They're on fresh domains, but not only how they're being indexed, but how they're ranking. They're on page 1. Now, the downside is they're not getting much traffic. Let's be clear. Like, no one's going to make even $1 at those levels of traffic, but we're like 1 to 2 weeks in. And I think if we look back at starting websites, I've started a lot of websites over the years in the, over the last decade or so. This is really quick for a website to get indexed and start getting rankings and traffic.
Yeah, that's lightning fast. I mean, I think of the kind of classic Google sandbox that we talk about. The Google always denies, yet we all know is there. It's been there. It takes probably 6 months to 12 months to really start to see a new domain, especially these days with a content site, start to rank. Like you said, indexation, they're processing so much more content with so much AI content, so indexing is slowed down. So to get a site not only ranked, but getting actual traffic, not just showing up in Ahrefs and getting this projected 20 that doesn't actually exist, but actually getting clicks in 2 weeks. I mean, that just shows not only you obviously found a really good area. I don't know which niche these sites are in, but you obviously found something good. But also, this really shows what Google's looking for these days, right? I mean, it's not the content site. It's this kind of stuff, something that does something, some tool, something that gives the user a capability that they can't duplicate with AI overviews. So that is awesome. I mean, yeah, it's not so many clicks yet, but if I told you I launched a brand new content site and it's ranking and it's getting clicks, but any clicks in less than 2 weeks, you would say, wow, you really found something incredible to do that with this. And that, something that sounds like you built in an evening, essentially. That's amazing.
Well, and that, going back a couple weeks ago, just, to what you said, like both of these were built with ChatGPT 01. And I probably could have used a code builder AI tool, right? Like, because they have those GPTs that are specifically code builders, but I just used ChatGPT, the 01 model to create the code. I did customize the CSS because I was able to kind of look, dump the code into a bit of a sandbox and go, oh, I don't really like how that looks as much. And so I was able to, but I didn't have to give it specific instructions, like, do this HTML, do this CSS. It was more like, hey, I want the colors to be softer. Hey, I want the buttons to be rounder. Hey, and it was able to give me that. It only took about an hour or less to get that information out, and then just drop it on the website. These are single page websites. They're not fancy. They're not even WordPress builds. They're just HTML. And so, what's the long play? Yeah, hopefully keep getting some traffic. Hopefully these sites continue to rank for more and more related keywords, and hopefully move up the rankings for their target keyword. Drop some ads on it, and maybe go from there. I mean, obviously, you could start to think a little bit bigger, but I'm not really thinking beyond that. But it does create a compelling use case for me to maybe do more than 5 this year. If I can find the topic, and you can find a calculation that you need in your daily life. I mean, it's hard to argue against spending an hour and $10 on a domain to put it up on shared hosting and just see what happens with it. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, and I wonder, once you get these established as these sort of useful sites, helpful sites, if you will, does that then unlock for you the ability to expand them in more of the traditional kind of content site direction? Because I know a lot of people in the industry, myself included, have seen, even though, again, a Google feature that Google denies exists, there seems to be this site level classifier that kind of says, this is a niche content site. Don't give them any rankings.
Yeah.
And if it's an e-com site, for example, or tool site like this, not only will Google rank it for the tool, but they'll often basically treat the content like they treated content 4 years ago, before all the craziness happened recently. So I wonder if you kind of get yourself in good graces here by having these calculator sites, and it's a tool and people are using it as a tool. Would that then unlock that you could put on the same domain kind of more your traditional content and drop some ads into that too and start to rank that content? It really gets my mind going. Like, instead of what we've seen a lot of people do in the space, which is take a content site, tack on a pretend e-com thing or a forum or something to try to revive it, you're kind of going the opposite direction. You have a legit tool. Could you tack a content site on and monetize that?
It is crazy to think of some of the websites I own that have a lot of great content, or we'll call it good content, on it. And they're almost to the point where we're going to see these tool sites rank for more keywords pretty soon than they currently rank for. It's really interesting to your point, like the type of site it is. So it's exciting. It's cool. I suppose it's as far along as I could ever have hoped a couple weeks in, but I'm not exactly going to retire next week on this. So it's a balance, right? Okay. What have we got going on for you this week in the world of side hustles?
Yeah. So quickly, because several people wrote to me and asked, I'll give a very quick update on Toaster Guy, my extremely experimental vertical video YouTube channel. It's up to 5,700 views now. I made 3 more videos. One of them was how to keep your toaster very clean. Spoiler alert, aluminum foil. And that has gotten, I think, 500, 600 views in the last 24 hours. I did another one this morning on making pancakes. So yeah, it's not, again, very similar. Not going to start paying the bills anytime soon, but it's still getting traction, still getting people visiting it. And I think it shows, vertical video is, again, powerful. But my real one for this week, I want to give an update on another project that I shared last year, which is my food alert newsletter. So for people who weren't tuned in then, this is a newsletter that I started completely by accident on my main website, which is Bay Area Telegraph. It's a local news site and travel site for the Bay Area and San Francisco Bay Area. And I started publishing some kind of like food recall stories and food things that happened where there was a food recall, basically. And I figured if I'm going to do this, I might as well create a newsletter segment within my main newsletter. It's not a whole separate, ConvertKit account or anything like that, just a segment. And I'll create a landing page for this food alert newsletter, and I'll drop it in at the end of the article. Well, these articles started going viral, not on my own site, but on some of the aggregators that I work with and I'm tied into. And they're very particular about sharing data, but I'll say, there are things like MSN and you can see like Smart News, that kind of stuff. So the articles started to get picked up there, sent out to a national audience, and people started signing up for this newsletter. And it just kept growing, and it's continued to grow. I have not really done much. I just occasionally publish these stories. I'm up to 2,241 subscribers.
Wow.
100% organic, no effort at all. Sometimes I'll get a day where I'll get like 30 or 40 new ones, and I have no idea where they came from. I can't track it. I have no idea like where this has ended up, but some aggregator decided to surface one of these stories and it goes semi-viral somewhere. And I start getting these new people subscribing, and you got to figure the subscription rate here, the convert rate must be very low.
Right.
So it must be getting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of views to be getting, hundreds of subscribers, but up to 2,241, again, 100% organic. And so what I've kind of trying to figure out is, all right, what do I do with this? So what I've done so far, I hadn't really had any strategy, starting to try to develop one. I'm sending periodic emails out just as a blast to this list. Basically, when I publish a new story that's about food safety or some kind of food recall, I publish it on my site and I just basically put a link into the newsletter and send it out. And that's been doing pretty well so far. It's at about a 33% open rate, right just under about a 7% click rate. And when people click through, those articles are then monetized with Mediafine, just like on my main site. So it's not a huge amount of revenue, but every time I send one of these out, it's getting some clicks and getting some more traffic. And you can see how it could pretty readily scale. What I'm doing at the moment to try to kind of build on it, I'm setting up some sequences to try to really automate this. So to do kind of like, in addition to those announcements where there's some big food recall or something happens, Costco's eggs aren't good and check your fridge and go figure out if you've got them, that kind of thing. I'm also trying to write more evergreen articles.
Right.
I've already done a lot of food. Yeah, a lot of food articles, strange foods, interesting stuff. So I've started scheduling those as sequence emails where every day, if you're part of this list, you get, some interesting or compelling food-related article. And it's things like, I did a story about what's in a Filet-O-Fish sandwich at McDonald's. what's the fish, what's actually been used there, what's the actual ingredients in a Costco hot dog, tie into the podcast. And those stories have done well. And so I've started scheduling those out. And again, they're getting pretty solid click-throughs on that. So I'm thinking if I just schedule one per day in the sequence, every new person who gets into this, even if I'm not doing any work, is going to be getting those for 30 days, 60 days, however many days I schedule it out. And the economics of it start to get really interesting. So I kind of did like some back of the napkin calculations. If I do a daily email, and maybe I can bump up the click rate on that. If I put multiple stories in, maybe make it a bit more compelling, maybe I could get 10%. Even right now, that means I'm getting maybe 225 clicks per day. I get about a $38 RPM on these stories. So that's like, $8 a day, something like that, almost $250 a month. So if I just keep scaling that, maybe I should, buy subscribers. Should I do Facebook ads? I'm not sure exactly how to get more people in. But I'm thinking if I schedule these out, it's totally automated. And if I can just grow that list a little bit, this could actually become a viable traffic source for my site.
It's interesting to think about as well, like, if we go back to what got you these subscribers in the first place, it was writing these articles that got aggregated. Like, I'm also wondering if like the best way to grow this newsletter is just to keep writing those articles. Yeah. And then when you write those articles, they can be sent to the newsletter, right? So you can almost double dip by writing articles on topics that your current newsletter would appreciate and like, and also would give you, we'll just say, more irons in the fire for a site to get a story to get picked up by an aggregator, go viral, and get you more subscribers in the process.
And it's even better because if they're evergreen, I can write the article, get new subscribers from it, and then add it to the sequence. And then every new subscriber from then to forever who signs up is going to get that article in the sequence at some point, as long as they stay subscribed. So you're almost not only, getting your subscribers for free, but you're building this little flywheel where, if I write one of these a day and I do it for 100 days, I could stop. And all those people are going to keep getting those, or, every new subscriber is going to be worth more and more to me because they have more emails they're getting where I don't have to lift a finger. So I'm thinking I'm probably just going to keep doing this organically, but I'm just going to try to automate the content as much as I can.
I think it's great. And I think it's proof like you're not trying to represent yourself as an expert, but you can create something around a topic you're not an expert in. You don't have to necessarily be an expert in it. I wonder, I've gotten to know you over the years. You're just a naturally curious guy. And I think that aspect of your personality means that you're probably going to be able to be interested in this topic much more than the average person. I do wonder about how interesting, food safety is to you. And if that could end up being the reason why you might stop paying attention to this topic. But outside of that, like, it's proof that you really can create a community and create a newsletter and create an experience around something you're not an expert in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to think, okay, this model seems to work with this specific, really random type of content. Which, it's not so interesting to sit down and write, 500-word piece about these are the eggs, this is the scoot and shack, this is, all that kind of stuff. It's not so fun. But I'm thinking, is there another topic that my site ranks weirdly well for and gets weirdly, large amounts of traffic over that I am actually interested in? So one that stood out to me, and I'm very early stages of considering this, is Starbucks. I've mentioned this before. My site, for some reason, is apparently an authority on Starbucks. I get a lot of traffic if I write about Starbucks stuff. I love going to Starbucks. It seems to have a passionate community around it. I've seen this do well for other kind of big brands that people like. I shared last week about the, what's good at Trader Joe's website. So I'm thinking, could I do something similar where I even have a Facebook page, drive traffic there, review new Starbucks stuff, get people into a newsletter. It's already doing well on the site. It's already stuff I'm writing about. It gets my wheel spinning, like, maybe not food safety in the long run, but could I take the same model, automated content, organic newsletter growth, and apply it to something where I could see myself writing about it for another 5 years or whatever?
Well, and we know that you would promptly drive down to your local Starbucks to get the eye in the sky view of whatever you're talking about. Referencing some of your past podcasts where you've actually gone and validated the McDonald's ice cream machine and such things. So, Okay, well, those are great updates. I personally lost myself for a minute or two while you're talking, looking over your Toaster Guy YouTube channel here, and so I think it's so fascinating, so interesting. Yeah, you have a video that's gotten over 1,000 views now, so I think it's great, and I really want to watch the one that you have here. Is it actually bad to stick a fork in a toaster? Tell me you actually demonstrated that live.
I did not yet, but people were very angry that it was just kind of a scientific piece. So I'm thinking I might have to do it, but I don't know how to do it safely. Hopefully, I mean, I could double dip. It could end up being a cautionary tale to share with the Food Alert newsletter as well.
Yeah, I can see there's some crossover here, if you see what I'm getting at, between these two side hustles. So, anyways, okay, let's get into weird niches. I just saw that from the top yours, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know where you come up with these sometimes. Mine's a little bit of I don't know. It's a very weird topic. I thought it was fun. I'll share the backstory on it. Let me pull it up here, and then I'll share if you're watching, you'll see it. But if you're not, I'll give you the website. I'm not going to read you the URL because it's like a government website. So it's not a weird niche site in the vein of, hey, go out and start this. Although it does beg some questions here, but it is a very interesting site, and it's a drip calculator. So I'm on the whole calculator thing. So I kind of felt like I had to go to the calculator site here, and it's under this vein of water science activities, and it's through the USGS. I don't know what that is. I should have looked it up, but it's Water.usgs.gov. So it's a government website, and it's this interesting thing. How much water does a leaking faucet waste? Now, I've often thought about this because I'm kind of I don't like wasting stuff. So every time there's been a leaky faucet, I've always come at it from the standpoint of we're wasting water. Not from the standpoint of how much are we wasting or how much is that going to cost me or how much. I just want to get it fixed because I don't like wasting stuff. I hate throwing food away if it goes bad. But I thought this was really interesting because it really tackles that question. So it starts by saying there's no scientific definition of the volume of a faucet drip, but after measuring a number of kitchen and bathroom sink faucets for our calculations below, we're going to use 1/4 millimeter as the volume of a faucet drip. And by these drip estimates, 15,140 drips equals 1 gallon. Looking at it this way, it seems like that drop of water down the drain is pretty insignificant. However, use the form or calculator below to see how all those drops flowing in real time can add up to a flood. So it kind of gives us a couple of prompts. There's 3 drop downs here. First off, and so Thomas, let's do this live. I'm gonna put it in the ball in your court. Feel free to go big if you want, for dramatic effect here. But let's talk number 1. About the number of drips per minute that you think said leaky faucet is dripping at.
I'd say 30. Okay. Yeah, drip every 2 seconds.
So that's like drip, drip, drip.
Yep.
Drip, something
that seems
like that.
You wouldn't fix it. You wouldn't bother to fix it if it was doing that, maybe.
Yeah, it's annoying, right? But it's like, do I really want to carve out the time to fix that? Okay, so we got 30 drips per minute. Good. Now let's talk about the number of faucets on average in each home that you think are doing this. Now, again, you might just say only 1 leaky faucet, or maybe say 2 leaky faucets. Maybe you want to go big. They give you the option of 1 to 5.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm going to go with 4 faucets. I'm thinking Bay Area, my demographic, thinking of the audience I typically target.
Okay. Let's stick with the Bay Area. How many homes do you want to go for that have these leaky faucets? And we'll say maybe in the Bay Area, your drop down here gives you the choice of 1 all the way up to 1 million homes.
Okay, so my kind of target audience is 980,000 people. That's the East Bay area that I cover. So let's go with that. If everybody in my total addressable audience for my newsletter were to have a leaky faucet.
Okay, so we
4
got
leaky faucets.
1 million homes with 4 leaky faucets each at 30 drips per minute. And if I hit the button here, that is, my goodness, over 172 billion drips per day. Do I have that right? I think I do, which accounts for 11 million gallons of water per day.
Wow.
And 4 trillion gallons per year. Again, I think I'm reading those numbers right.
That's crazy. Yeah. I love when you originally shared this, I thought this was a site that had some practical purpose for your own, like you were saying, figure out how much your leaky faucet is costing you so you should fix it. But no, this is just showing you the theoretical leaky faucets across a large population. I don't know what purpose this would serve. What does this site exist to do? Okay, that's a terrifyingly large amount of water, but what am I supposed to do? Go door to door and convince my neighbors to fix their faucet?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the sidebar here, right, like the challenge questions is what this falls under. How much water falls during a storm? How much water does a dripping faucet waste? How much water does it take to grow a hamburger? I think there's, I mean, talk about weird niches. We could do a segment on each of those right there. It clearly is addressing, like, from a greater perspective, water shortage, water cycles, all these sorts of things. And I think it's just one of those things that's meant to get you to think about it. I just got back from being out in nature for a few days, and it's really hard to describe to someone the grandeur of some of these places until you go there. And then you find it's like, you still can't describe it, but it means something more when you're there. And I kind of feel like, to some degree, a website like this is kind of meant to put in perspective, like, your leaky faucet might not matter in a vacuum, but the fact is, if you have a leaky faucet, you're not addressing it, so are so many others. And what does that mean for the larger, scope of water and that sort of thing? But any application people could have from this, I don't know. I don't wake up in the morning thinking I got a problem that I need an answer to in terms of calculating how much water loss I have. But at the same time, it's fascinating to think about if they could build that, and it's a very simple calculator. I mean, what could other people do?
Yeah, I think of this in a school context, part of a science curriculum or something like that. And I think that's an important thing if you're thinking of calculators. I mean, you probably are. After hearing your early results, people are probably thinking about that. What could I build? It could be something that solves a practical business-related problem. But these kinds of educational calculators, I see people use that all the time. And I think if you could create something that a bunch of students are going to use, or a teacher might want to use, or many teachers might want to use in their curriculum, that could get substantial traffic too. And that might not show up in a keyword research tool, because people might not be putting it into Google. It might just be something that teachers know about, or put in their lesson plan or whatever. So yeah, it gets me thinking, okay, this is more of an educational thing, showing you some information about this water science topic. Are there other kind of educational calculators you could build where you might not have so much competition?
Yeah, we featured a weird niche many months back. I think it was Keep the Score or something. It was a calculator site that was around scorekeeping, right? And I think we found a lot of teachers were using it, and it was being used in a lot of school systems. So good point. Okay, let's move on to your weird niche. It does not have to do with water, to be clear. I don't think there's any water connection. Ours aren't connected this week. I'll pull it up on the screen while you talk about it.
So this is, I don't even know how to correctly pronounce it. The domain is ozbcoz, OZBCOZ. You can see that the design of it is it's like 2007 WordPress stock theme. The title of the site is Jim's Ukulele Songbook, because of course it is. That flows from that domain. Obviously, ozbcoz would be Jim's Ukulele Guitar Songbook. But this is basically the best website for ukulele tabs, which are the chords that you're going to play if you want to play a popular song on your ukulele. And I play the ukulele, and I discovered this because they have the best tabs. So you go there, and if you go and click into songs, again, the interface here leaves a lot to be desired. You can pull up all of these popular songs.
Oh, yeah.
And presumably Jim has gone through and basically listed out the chords and written everything out for an incredible number. It's a huge database of songs, basically like everything that you can imagine, old folk songs and classic songs, all the way up to he'll do modern songs from kind of contemporary artists. I don't know if he's got help or people are submitting things here, but it's got to be thousands of songs. You wouldn't know it at all if you landed on the domain. Most people are probably finding this through search, and it does get a pretty substantial amount of search traffic. So probably, I looked at Ahrefs, it's getting, they say, about 49,000 organic. So I guess it's probably a lot higher than that. It looks like 47 as we're looking at it here. My guess is it's probably higher. It's a DR39. But I looked at SimilarWeb, and they were estimating something on the order of 300,000 visits per month. And that makes sense, because you got to imagine a lot of it's social and a lot of direct traffic. I mean, I know if I'm going to look for a new ukulele song to play, this is the first place I'm going. I'm going to put in that weird domain, and I'm going to land here and find, the best tabs to be able to play on my ukulele. So I think the things I take away from this, I mean, for one thing, if you're doing something really useful, the domain doesn't necessarily matter at all. Like, I have no idea what the domain is. And you can see, it's monetized with ads. There's a PayPal donation form. Traffic, I think, has been fairly consistent. It saw a bump, it saw a decline, but I think it's overall been doing pretty well. Yeah, if you look at the overall graph, it was up higher in 2023. It had a bit of a fall, but it's still in the long run up pretty significantly. And I think just by doing something really well, whoever this Jim is, don't know how he's creating all his content, but he's doing great.
I mean, it feels like, so I just was looking here, and if you hover over the drop down, it looks like there's over 4,000 songs.
Yeah.
It felt higher, to be honest with you, but I mean, it's just, there's so many, it's hard to know. That means he has, like you said, documented the tabs for over 4,000 songs on the ukulele. That's absolutely a ton of work.
Yeah, and if you click into any of them, it's got all the lyrics, it's got your chords, it's got some really nice features where if you hover over a chord, it'll show you the how to play it basically. So it's super helpful, and the design is just so rudimentary. But I think it's a good example of a situation where design and branding don't matter at all if what you're doing is genuinely helpful.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't have to worry about ranking a lot of this stuff just because it is super useful, and people probably spend a ton of time on the site. I mean, I think about if I'm going to learn a new song, I'll pull the site up. I might have it up for 45 minutes on my phone. So I imagine that the time on page here is just astronomical.
Yeah, he's got a login up here too. I wonder what that experience is like. I wonder if maybe he's, I don't know. Do you get? Is he crowdsourcing a bit of this? Maybe getting some help from people who volunteer and donate song chords, tabs. I'm not a musician, as you can tell. I'm curious what that looks like.
Yeah, maybe there's some kind of submission, or he's getting them from other places, and there's all kinds of other features. You can basically start it scrolling automatically, so you can kind of play along without having to touch the phone to scroll. It's got YouTube videos of people playing these songs on the ukulele. A lot of the times you can go through and see example of somebody playing really well. And a lot of the stuff that is ranking are just the names of these songs, basically. So he's ranking for some pretty big song names, especially when you look at, like traditional or songs that people might play a ton of. I see Jingle Bell Rock ukulele in there, for example. All this kind of stuff. He's probably doing super well of just so many songs and ranking for these big keywords that people are putting in. And it's probably bringing in people who aren't even ukulele players. Like a lot of these seem to have a guitar version, and that seems to be doing even better.
Well, I was gonna say, and I'm not a musician. I didn't feel like the crossover between ukulele and guitar was there. They're both a strumming instrument of sorts, but a couple of things to note by looking at the keywords he ranks when they're on screen here is that the vast majority of them do not have the word ukulele in them. They're just more generic chords. And it's almost like he's done such a good job making something that he ranks for the larger topic, right? And they're all song names, like Never Gonna Give You Up chords, Jingle Bell Rock ukulele, but New York chords. And so these are larger search queries, around 1,000 per search query, per 1,000 per month kind of thing. So it's almost like you said, he's done so well that he ranks for the kind of these broader terms that his website is doing a good job of satisfying the user for.
Yeah, sadly, there's many more guitar players than us ukulele players out there. So I can imagine that, if you do a good job, and there is definitely crossover, but I think it shows, if you do a great job of one thing, it's like he kind of used the ukulele to get his foot in the door, essentially. And now he's ranking for something that's going to get a ton more traffic. And I also like that he has monetized, right? Like I think we see a lot of these sites that are a passion project and people do a great job, but they're not doing anything to monetize. And this has pretty good ad monetization. And it looks like it's pretty deliberate. The ads are placed in great positioning, but where they don't mess with the content. He's got a donation form front and center. He's obviously trying to make some money off of this, and I bet it's doing really well for him.
Great site to feature. And a good way to close out. Lots happening today and this week in the news. We talked about TikTok, and we'll keep you posted on that story. There's so much in the news. We didn't get a chance to talk about Reddit and some of the fallout from last week. We will, I'm going to say, probably address that next week. I don't want to guarantee it. Who knows what's going to happen in the news? It might get pushed down another week like it did this week, but we'll try to bring Reddit back next week and talk about where they're going there. Overall, though, everybody, have a great weekend, and we'll see you again, same time, same place next week for the news. See ya.